This is the PO Advantage system. And so what we're doing here is we're really trying to consolidate all of your purchasing into a single application. Many of you are probably going to different websites all the time and really don't have a great control over the items that you're purchasing and where they are located in your facilities. And so this system will allow us to be able to do that very quickly and easily. We also continue to give you access to your supplier websites. So for example, if you're used to using GFS Experience, a fabulous website with great features and functionality, you can continue to use that with PO Advantage while maintaining some of the controls that are available to you in PO Advantage. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to kind of walk you through the system, pretty straightforward, but I'm going to kind of carry you through this front panel. What we really do is manage the life cycle of a purchase order through this order transaction flow widget here in the middle. And essentially what's happening there, as you can imagine, in your facility, you've got a number of orders that might be in progress. So you might have multiple people, for example, generating purchase orders that are not yet ready to be placed. And then when they're ready to go, they go into the approved bucket, and then those that are waiting to be approved can be routed through to the appropriate approver. And then confirmation comes in from a vendor electronically, typically. So if you're, for example, working with McKesson or with Gordon Foods, after you place that order electronically, you're going to get an electronic confirmation, and that'll let you know what we should expect to receive to the back door, right? So we know that particularly over COVID, there was lots of concerns about items that were back ordered and those types of things. What we do is we manage that electronically and then allow that to flow into a back ordered items bucket, and we'll look at that in just a second. But we also manage receiving inside of our system. So as an order is received to your back door, you've got a packing slip, you can tell the system which items you have received, and then we can manage the invoice electronically as well. So we're going to dig right in, and I'm going to kind of carry one of these purchase orders all the way through the system, and you can kind of see what it looks like. So let's start over here on the order button. And the first thing you'll notice is there's a couple of different order buttons here. One of them is the create order function, which we'll look at in just a second. We have multiple ways to generate a purchase order inside of PO Advantage. One of them is just generating a standard purchase order by searching, typing, and selecting items. Another methodology is through a mobile device. So we have a mobile app for both the iOS and the Android platforms to allow you to generate an order. And then we also have a little fob scanner, and we'll kind of look at this in a few minutes. This is used for multiple purposes inside of PO Advantage, but one of those methodologies is to be able to scan shelf labels. For example, if you have a central supply location with putaways for individual items, you can put a shelf label there, and then as you notice there's a need, you can scan that item. You can also do a cycle count inside the system. We do full inventory management inside of PO Advantage, so you can continue to manage your inventory inside of PO Advantage. So let's just dig in and start with a couple of these. So I'm going to start by clicking on create order. This is a pretty straightforward methodology for generating an order. For example, you can start typing in syringe and select an item out of the list, and you can begin to build that purchase order. You notice I'm doing the quantities here as well. And a super important thing for some of our next level stuff that we're going to show today is that this is broken down by GL code. And so the item is already coded to a GL account. And as a result of that, we'll be able to send this invoice over on the accounts payable system and be able to integrate all of that in. So as we go on, let's go ahead and let's search for a Gordon's item now, just to kind of show you how this works. So essentially, what happens is we're dealing with a single purchase order on this front cover sheet, and we can continue to maintain multiple items and multiple vendors. We have links with office supply vendors. We have links with multiple med-surg and other kinds of vendors as well. Again, our goal really is to get 100% of the spend into the system so that we can help you manage that. So you can see here we've got the cover sheet, but we've also got a tab that shows your McKesson order, as well as another tab that shows your Gordon Food Service order. Okay. And so what that allows us to do is to very quickly and easily set up a purchase order and process it. So I'm going to go ahead and approve and send this one, and then we'll come back to this page in just a second, and I'll show you a couple of other things. So I had mentioned that we have multiple ways to generate a purchase order inside of our system. One of the other ways is through this quick orders methodology. And it's pretty nice. It allows you to break down by vendor what you're going to purchase order, what your purchase order needs to have on it. And then it allows you to build this as you go. So for example, if I wanted to put in a quantity of 5 here, it'll automatically begin to build my PO for me as I go along, right? So this is going to be a little mini pad of my purchase order. I also have these little stars over here on the left-hand side to kind of list out my favorites. So for example, I can go to my favorites template, and then all of the items that I want on my purchase order for the favorites tab can be generated from here. So you could do that a couple of different ways. One of the other methodologies that we allow is a generate purchase order. That's really done in concert with all of your minimums, maximums, and on-hand quantity counts. So if you're keeping perpetual inventory inside the system, you've got a minimum set up for a particular item. If it drops below the minimum, it'll order automatically back up to the maximum. So let's go back over to our home page real quick, and I want to kind of follow that purchase order that we sent through the system real quick. So we have auto confirmation set up, so that means that the order went out electronically, and we got an electronic confirmation back automatically. That typically happens within 30 minutes, so you'll know what is expected to be shipped during that time. And then it moves immediately in the waiting to be received bucket. And so you can see I've got several purchase orders here waiting to be received. Some of these have different colors associated with them. And what that means is that I originally had a purchase order that had everything listed on it that was correct. That's what the green means. And so I originally ordered it at a certain price. I got a confirmation back at a certain price, and it's ready to receive with that original price and quantity. So green means that you're receiving everything that you ordered at the right price. A yellow means that you have partially received the items that are on a purchase order. And we'll look at that in just a second. And then a red means that you've got something that's out of whack. Either the quantities were actually confirmed at a different quantity level or a different price level. So let's start just by receiving the one that we just now did. And one thing that you'll notice is we had a single purchase order that we placed. It broke it out into 2 orders that are waiting to be received. So obviously your McKesson and your Gordon Foods are not being delivered at the same time, so we want to be able to receive those separately. So let's do each one of these here real quick. You can see this was our original order quantity here. We've got our confirmation quantity, and then our receiving quantities matching up. Just a couple of notes here about the receiver. Notice we've got this sync scanner button. I had mentioned that there's multiple functions for this little fob scanner. So you can scan either in that live scan bar or in the sync scanner little button, which allows you to take the items offline and not be near your computer and be able to scan those in and then come back and synchronize them. So it allows for that. It also allows for you to upload a PDF or a scan of the packing slip. And so our concept here is that we're going to have the original order, the confirmation, the receiver, and the invoice, and sort of bundle all of those up to go over to accounts payable so that they know that everything that they're getting ready to pay is connected properly. And so that allows us to put that scanned receiver there, or the packing slip there as well, so that all of that supporting material is with the purchase order when it's paid. So let's just start with a couple of things here. You can click on received a different product. That obviously happens a lot in the COVID land. So don't have to worry about that as much now, hopefully. But certainly if you received a replacement item, excuse me just a second. If you received a replacement item, you want to be able to indicate that here very quickly. But let's just assume that this one is received. I'll click on the received order. And notice that our receiver count is going down now. So it was originally 6, and this is now moved in the waiting to be invoiced bucket. We get electronic invoices every night from our electronic vendors. And so if you receive something to your back door, usually that same day you're going to get an electronic invoice for it. And we can review that in just a second too. So let's go look real quickly at this one that's yellow. So you'll notice here, I've got a line item that is still open and ready to be received, but down below here, I've already received this as a partial receiver. So this is the exact same item I originally ordered for. I confirmed for. My original receiver had 2 on it, so I have a pending quantity of 2 that I'm trying to receive here. So this is just an item. Maybe it came from 2 different distribution centers, for example. Sometimes that happens, and you get a partial receive of even a single line item, and you need to be able to maintain and manage that. So I'll go ahead and receive that one as well. Now, you can imagine we worked through the receiving process with all of our purchase orders, and now these are waiting to be invoiced. And so if I go to the invoice button here, again, this is going to happen electronically for most of your vendors. But if for some reason you have an email vendor that you are sending out purchase orders to, you can very rapidly upload a PDF of that invoice, and then you can key that in very quickly here too. So I'll just kind of show you what that looks like really quickly. We can map this up to a GL code in line as well. And let's go ahead and create an invoice. And you can see this generates the Gordon Foods invoice in the Gordon Foods format very, very quickly for you. This payment packet kind of shows you all of the details that are associated with that purchase order. Let's see if we can get all of that generated real quick. So this has the order, the confirmation, the receiver, and the invoice all bundled together for you. And you can see there's the original purchase order, the confirmation. The receiver, if you had more than one receiver, it'd show both of those in that situation. And then you've got the invoice as well. Okay, and so a couple of things here, you can mark that as ready to pay, and you can send that packet over to accounts payable. You could also dispute the invoice if there was some problem with it, or you could keep up with some internal notes. And then we have an audit report that kind of takes it from the original purchase order all the way through. And so that just gives you visibility to all of the details of a purchase order as it goes through here. I'm going to click on that home button. I want us to look real quickly at this back ordered items bucket here. This allows you to take action on a back ordered item, and I've sort of emulated one of these through confirmation. So you can imagine you placed your purchase order originally, the confirmation comes back and says, hey, I'm going to have to back order this particular item for either some period of time or provide a recommendation for a replacement, one of the two. And so what this allows us to do is take action, and notice you can create a new purchase order with a cross-reference item. I don't have a cross-reference associated with this, but you can create a new order and have it automatically select a cross-reference item for you. You could close that line. Maybe you actually have enough of some other functional equivalent item and you don't really need to complete that order, so you can close that line and it'll disappear. But one of the really cool features that we have is the capability to hide it from the list for some period. So if I got a notification, for example, that it was going to be back ordered for 2 weeks, I could then select my calendar here and say 2 weeks from now, I want it to show back up in my widget. And so when the 30th arrives, it's going to show back up in my back ordered items, and I can check for that again. If it now remember, one of the unique things about this situation is it's still in my waiting to be received bucket. Okay, so I'm still waiting on that particular item in my received bucket, so it'll continue to be there, but I want to be able to visually take action on these back ordered items. So this gives me the ability to sort of snooze that alert that's in the back ordered items. And so when I submit this, it kind of disappears from here. And then on the 30th, it'll show back up again. If it happens to show up before that, it'll still be in the waiting to be received bucket so that you can manage that. Now, that covers the main flow of our transactions coming through the system. I want to also show you real quickly this invoice approvals component. So this is not allowed for all users. So if you have a financial user specifically for PO Advantage, we can assign this little bucket for them to be able to review. And so let's just say that we had an item or a purchase order that came through this system, and there were price changes, or there were needs to review it for whatever reason manually that were annotated inside of the internal notes. You can manage that all the way through the system. And if it's waiting for approval here, you can route that to someone else to review. So let's just say that the purchase order was originally for a quantity of 5 at $10. It came in at $19. And so it's gone through the approval process, and then I flag it to be reviewed, which means that I'm going to send it back maybe to the purchaser and say, hey, is this really right that this item has jumped up in price or whatever, thinking that accounts payable really doesn't always know that information, whereas someone placing the purchase order might. And that can be reviewed and then cleared through a note process where you're managing each one of those, and then pass back to the approval status. So it goes from waiting for approval into reviewing, and then back to waiting for approval. Once everything's clear, though, it drops into the ready to pay bucket. So I could go into the ready to pay again, and I'm going to just show you one of these again, just to remind you. I have the capability to dispute this invoice, and I could put this in here and set up an email address for that user, or I could add additional users that I need to, and send a message along with that. And what happens is it attaches this payment packet to it and allows your note to be associated with that particular purchase order when you input the emails that are associated with it. So that allows you to be able to manage that through the process. Okay, so that's kind of this whole front panel. This is what we call the life cycle of a purchase order. It goes all the way through the actual purchasing process through to receiving. If you're keeping up with your quantity on hands, when you receive the items, it will up your quantity on hand automatically for you. So all of that process works very seamlessly. Let's take a look real quick at our account section. I want to show you what a formulary looks like for our system. And essentially what we're trying to do here is manage your item list, and it helps you over the process to be able to consolidate to individual items. For example, if you wanted to be able to control those across an entire group, we have sort of a group management level login that allows you to manage the formulary throughout the entire organization, and then publish that inventory and the inventory updates down to the lower locations as well. Just a couple of things I'll point out here in terms of the item list itself. We do have the capability to load images for you. So those images are sort of linked up to the accounts that are associated with it. So it makes it really easy to find things. Let me also look at some briefs here. I've got a couple of brief items that are sort of set up as mock contract items. Notice over here on the left-hand side, this is indicating a contract under HPS. So each one of the items that are contracted items will get a GPO icon with them indicating which contract that's connected to, and it'll allow you to be able to manage and audit that pricing. Inside each one of these items, I'll also point out some of the details of that. So let's just start with the item details up here, and I'm going to move this up a little bit if I can grab it. Okay, let's just scroll down here. There we go. So in addition to the product ID, which is really the distributor part number in our system, we give you the capability to manage this description a little bit if you wanted to make some modifications to that. You can also put your own internal item numbers. The reason that that's important is if you have keywords or maybe you have a true internal item number or a competitive item that you're making a conversion on, for example. If you input that into the internal number, it gives you the capability to be able to cross those over very quickly. So one of the common things in the long-term care arena is a lot of people use chucks for underpads. So you can put in the word chucks there, and it'll automatically find the equivalent item. We also are managing both the purchasing unit to measure and the dispensing unit to measure. So that gives you the capability to convert those. So for example, if you're buying this by the case and you're dispensing in and counting it by the bag, it gives you the capability to do that. And let's just say that there are 6 bags in a case. That conversion allows you to be able to have a dispensing value that is different than your original purchasing value, for example. We also allow you to manage charge codes. So if you're using an ancillary billing system that you want to be able to track charges out to a patient or a resident, that gives you the capability to bind that that billable code to the item as well, so that as the charges are generated, they're bridged over automatically. I had already mentioned the GL code and some of the contracting information here as well. We have that inventory by location. So we have not done a cycle count, you can tell on this particular item, but it kind of gives you an indication that, hey, you changed your dispensing unit to measure. You really should update your quantity on hands by the appropriate amount. So let's just say that I was going to make this 10 bags and this one was going to be 50 bags. So you get that updated as well. And then you also have the ability to add cross references. So if you had functional equivalencies that you wanted to be able to link over so that if there was a back order of one item, the other item is available, this gives you the capability to manage that on your own. So I'll go ahead and update this. And as you can see, we have, let's go back to our master accounts section. So I have both my Gordon Foods and my McKesson item masters here. You can also go to an overall master formulary for the entire organization. So if you had 50 vendors here, for example, and you went to master formulary, you could look for and manage all of those items in a single place. We also give you the capability to control your own GL codes, categories, and product put away locations as well. Okay, I want to shift gears for just 1 second and go to the dispensing section of our software. And I'm going to start by looking at it in touchscreen mode. We have, in addition to a mobile app for actually generating purchase orders, we also have a dispensing application. It also runs in both iOS and on Android. But it is very similar to this screen. So this kind of gives you a preview as to what that dispensing app looks like. This is in touch screen mode. And what it allows you to do is very quickly find a resident or a patient, select that patient, and then we show the history of the purchases or the dispenses for that particular patient inside of the app. So these are the items that have been charged out to that patient in the past. We also give you the capability to search for items on the fly. So if I'm searching for, oh, well, I got to type right. If I'm searching for another syringe, I can select that one, and then it very rapidly can pull over an item and mark it as a quantity of 1. Now, if I'm dispensing more than 1, all I have to do is tap that multiple times, and it's upping my quantity automatically. You can notice that my quantity on hands for my demo account are not very good. It thinks that I'm trying to dispense 3 with a quantity on hand of 0. And you may say, well, why are you allowing that? Why do you allow that to happen? Well, we know that the reality is that inventory counts can get off inside of a facility. So we want to be able to allow that because we make the assumption that the person is physically pulling this item off of the shelf and getting ready to dispense it. So we allow that to happen, but we give notifications and then we provide reporting on those items that have been charged out that are below their quantity on hand. And so that gives you kind of an audit capability as well. A couple of items here. Let me just see if I can find, maybe I don't have one on this resume. There we go. There's one that's got some quantity on hand. So you can see if I charge out these quantities without, it shows up without the red bar. So that means that I've got quantity on hand properly. When I'm done with this, I can just click on Save and Close, and that takes me back to the pages. Now, you'll notice something interesting just happened. You can see I got a notification that says that there are items in your formulary with a quantity on hand less than their minimum. And so it gives you the capability to generate an order based off of that very quickly. So let's go back over to our charges section. I want to show you a couple of other things here. Right now I'm set up for resident charges, but I can also toggle this and do just general account dispensing. So for example, here, if I wanted to search for gloves, and maybe I'm charging out a few of these gloves to this particular location, then this gives me the capability of doing that and dispensing it or reducing my inventory while not charging it out to a particular patient account. And this charges allows me just to process it and jump straight back over. All right, so that's the touch screen mode. I also want to show you quickly how to charge out with the little fob scanner. And this kind of gives you an idea of how the fob scanner works as well. I'm going to do it in disconnected mode. And the concept there is, hey, I've got this, maybe I've got a lanyard attached to this and I'm hanging around my neck. I could run around and scan items all day long and then come back to my computer and synchronize this scanner. And so that's kind of the mode that we're thinking about right here. You can see here, this is the history of my scans. Remember, I just charged out those items to the second floor closet here, and then I had some of my patient charges down below. So this is sort of a grid view of the charges as they're being processed. But let's do a quick scan here, and I'll show you what I'm using.
See on the camera there.
I have a barcode scan for some patients. And then I just imagine that I have some barcode labels here as well. So let's just assume that these are shelf labels that I'm going to dispense from. So I'm going to take my scanner here and I'm going to scan one of my patients. You can hear the scan process happening. And then I'm going to scan some of the items that I'm going to dispense to that patient. And then I'm going to flip over to another patient and scan a couple of items for that patient. So you go throughout the day doing this, and then you bring this back and we can synchronize it. So let's switch over to my sync scanner page, and I'm just going to press and hold this button. This goes into pairing mode and synchronizes it. Okay, and then I press that little button and it sends all of those scans. Now we send this in the raw form so that we can rapidly do some support if we need to. But once this is here, all we have to do is click on the process scans button. And all of those charges that we just now scanned are being dropped to our charge master down here below. So that's the simplicity of how this scanner works. And then once we're done, we just disconnect it again and it's ready to go again. It can go out in the field. And you could do charges both on, or you could do charges with the scanner and then clear it after synchronizing it and then go over and do a purchase order with it too. So you can use the same scanner for both of those purposes. Okay, just a couple of things on what happens next with that. So I'm going to go over to our charge export section. Let's just say that we need to be able to get those charges over into an external system. I have set up, I think, charge export to point click care. So that's one of the ancillary charge tracking systems, or one of the billing systems, I'm sorry, in the long-term care market. And my ancillary charge that I'm generating here, I want to be able to bridge that over. So this gives me the capability to be able to do that. I can select all of those and I can submit those to be exported. And then I get a notification later on that all of those have been exported properly, and I'll get an export file over here that is generated and sent over to the billing department automatically. And so that manages it and allows us to control it as we go along. Now, just a couple of quick things about maintenance long-term on this. We have the ability to do cycle counts. I'd mentioned that. I'm not going to go through that because that's a pretty involved process, but essentially what it allows us to do is buy, put away location, count the inventory that you have there and update that amount so that all of your inventory value reports and all of those kind of things generate properly. One of the other things that we have is the capability to generate a budget, and I'm just going to kind of quickly walk you through this process. I'll click on add budget. I don't have spend history in here, so I'm going to do it from inputting values, but you can do that from generating previous year spend. So if you've been using the system for a year, for example, it'll automatically have spend values by whatever component you're tracking here in your budget, and it can build a recommended budget for you. But let's just say I'm going to do that by inputting the values. I'm going to do it for next year. It's going to be based off of GL code. And I'm going to go ahead and start it at the beginning of this month. Let's just say my fiscal year starts in December to show you that. And then I'm going to base mine on a monthly census because I want to show you kind of how that works. And let's just say that my average census is 150. Okay. So I'm going to confirm and add these values to my budget. I'm guessing I don't apologize for that. Let me just see if I've got another option I can select here. Let's do it by product category maybe. So I apologize, my test account has been flushed, it looks like. And so yeah, there we go. So I've got product, and these are mostly my food categories, so I apologize for that. I don't have all of my categories for my med surg in here. You can split this out by specific categories too. I don't have that configuration turned on for my system, but you have the capability to do that. But let's just see, there's a couple of different ways that we can build out our budget here. I'm just going to start keying in some numbers to kind of show you how this works. So what I'm doing is I'm putting in what my yearly amount of my budget is going to be. And I'm doing this by category. You could do it by GL code. You could also do it by charge code if you want. But one of the things that you'll notice is it's breaking that number out evenly across the quarters and across the months. And so I'm going to just run very quickly and put some of these numbers down here so that we can take a look at the total budget overall. We won't go way out of whack with one category. Okay, so now that I've got all of these items, there's a couple of really interesting things that you can do here. So I told you that we were doing this by average census. Let's say that I had a census fluctuation that I know occurs traditionally in February, March, and April. So if my census goes down to 120, I got to type it right, don't I? Sorry, I think I didn't click all the way in the field. There we go. 120. Notice what's happening here. It's adjusting my numbers as we go. So if I know then that my average is 100 and then mine is 110 for that month. So notice my numbers are adjusting automatically as I go with the adjustment of the census. Now, if I realize that I also had some of those fluctuations occurring by month, in addition to my census numbers, you can also adjust those values. So for example, if I wanted this value to be 1500 instead, as I begin to update these numbers, Notice that it has made my quarters red. And what's happening is whichever numbers I'm keying in those quarters, it's making that adjustment and saying, hey, you need to rebalance these values. And so you can hit this rebalance. It clears that value by quarter. And then it says, hey, you're off by $700 for the amount. And it allows you to balance that one as well. And as you do that, it's going to update your yearly budget as well. So this gives you the capability to manage budget quickly and easily. I'm going to save this budget. Oh, I got to give it a name. Hold on a second. David test budget. Notice it's updating it up here as well. We'll save that budget here. And one of the things that we do now is we evaluate that to spin down. So I'm going to export this real quickly. And you'll see I did this for the future time, so it's not going to have actual spend values, but I'm going to bring this over here and show you what it looks like. So you can see here that I have the original budgeted amount, and then I've got a column for spend. And this is happening for each one of those breakdowns. So there's first quarter. It's got the budget, the spend, and the balance. And these are truly calculated fields. So even if you export this and then need to do some work on it, you can do some adjustments to it automatically, allowing it to update the values as you go. And so it does that for the year and the quarters, and then it also does it for each month. But let's just say, for example, that I needed to key in a value here. That's going to automatically calculate those for you as you go along. So the really cool part about this is that you can bind up your budget to a series of order rules. So let's go back up to the order section real quick. I'm going to show you briefly how an order rule works, and I'll add a new one. And you can name and put in a description for whatever you want. We'll just call this a test rule, and we'll call this max budget rule. I can type. And so you can say this is going to apply to a budget. Then it gives you the capability to select which budget it's going to be for and how you're going to evaluate it. So I love the within a percentage evaluation, because I can then put in, if it's within 10% of my budget on a monthly basis, I want to set that order for approval and send it to some other test user, some other approving user. And so anytime you place an order where that particular monthly's budget is within 10% of its maximum, it's going to give the order routing to that new approval user. Now, I can add additional routes for this. So if I wanted to do this, I don't have but one user set up for my test, but you could do approval level 2 to a different user, for example, and you can add notification to on screen. You could say max monthly budget exceeded. Okay. And then you could also send an email. So if I wanted to send this to me, I could automatically send an email when that budget is exceeded for that particular month. And then I add that rule, and then that rule is available to me. Now, you can also combine a series of rules. So if, for example, we wanted to do just a general max order, and we apply it to the order now instead of the budget. We're going to evaluate it as a maximum order, and we're going to do it on the total dollar value. And notice you can do it by overall purchase order or by individual distributor. So remember, on that purchase order screen, we had a single purchase order, but broken down by distributor. So you can evaluate that total dollar value by individual or the overall. And then let's just say that this is going to be $500. Okay, and then I'm going to do an on screen, and I'm going to say max order 500. Now, I'm not going to put on the approvals and that kind of stuff here as well, but you could do that, all kinds of different notifications. But let's just do an add rule here. And then I want to show you real quickly on a create order what that can look like. I'm going to use a template. We didn't talk about the templates earlier, but you can set up multiple types of templates here. Let's just use my favorites template. That's the one that we did with the star. And then I'm just going to put in some quantities here. Okay, so now I am over my maximum order rule. So when I go to approve, notice that it's going to give me an order route rule here, and then it's going to say that approval is required for that particular one. So that gives you kind of an idea of how that works. All right, so I'll point out the report section. We add to the reports almost every release cycle for PO Advantage. Right now, we do a pretty rapid release cycle. We're working on 2-week cycles right now. And so we do lots of this kind of stuff pretty regularly on the report section. But you can imagine we have, a lot of the standard types of reports. We have, an average min max report, which is kind of an inventory report for each individual item. We do facility price markups if you're charging out to patients or residents. Shelf labels, lots of barcode generating reports here as well. We do a whole series of order history reports. There's a generic purchase order history, which gives you a breakdown by vendor. Just lots of these types of reports, and we can dig into those maybe in a future webinar to kind of give you an overview of what those look like. I also didn't mention transfers, but I can just real briefly tell you what that's all about. So if you have multiple locations inside your own facility that you want to be able to maintain the minimums, maximums, and quantity on hands or perpetual inventory in those locations, we give you the capability to both requisition to central supply and then transfer those items out, or maybe you have a small central warehouse that you're using for a individual location. So for example, if you have an assisted living facility and you don't really generate orders from the assisted living facility, you manage that all in your SNF, for example, you could have just the transfer request portion set up for that assisted living facility. They could do a transfer request or a requisition to central supply. Central supply can manage their central supply inventory with put away locations and then sort of fulfill that like a mini distributor, if you will, to be able to push those items out there. So that's another feature. Don't really have time to go through all of the details of that today, but I just want to make sure I pointed out what that was. Also, yeah, that's a great question, Tom. He asked, who should you contact? So just a couple of quick things since we have a few minutes. I'll address the implementation process for PO Advantage. That's one of the big concerns that particularly larger groups of facilities have as they consider the possibility of implementing a system like this. We have what we call a white glove hands-on approach to doing the implementation. We have a customer success team that reaches out at the beginning of the implementation process and tries to understand your organization. They understand what your vendors are today and how to get those onboarded. They typically will reach out to vendors on your behalf to get your spend history reports loaded up for you. So we like to think that we're handling about 85% of that implementation process, which is usually a huge relief to those who are interested in the system. As you know, it can be pretty time consuming to get these systems implemented in a large group. So our team handles that for you. We then have sort of a handoff period after you go live of 30, 60, and 90 days where our customer success team follows up with you. We also pass that off to our support team. We manage support also live and in-person kind of support. We have both a little chat feature down here in the lower right, as well as a regular phone number and an email that you can reach out to us for any kind of issues or help that you need as you go along. In terms of actually making a connection for the next steps, if you're interested in understanding more, you can reach out to your HPS sales representative. or you can reach out to me directly if you like. We can help you very quickly be able to get connected with one of the team members that can evaluate your needs and give you kind of a customized demo. One of the things that we do is that integration with accounts payable I had mentioned. Today we are connected with the QuickBooks system. Obviously, that's one of the more prominent ones in the market. We also connect to Great Plains, both the on-premises version and the online version. We connect to Microsoft Dynamics. We also connect to Blackbaud in the is a financial system that's commonly used in the nonprofit space. So we connect to that, and we also do HL7 financial transactions. So if you have a practice management system that's handling your GL and talks natively HL7, we also do that as well as some custom exports. When you approve those invoices, you can send that packet over via email as well. Demo. One of the things that I didn't mention related to that, again, since we have a couple of minutes, is that we natively have capabilities for scanning medications. So on a medication, and I'll show this up real close. So this medication has a little G10 barcode up here, and that has lot number and expiration date associated with it. And so we can use this little scanner and both receive and dispense that item by lot number and expiration date, which is extremely helpful in some of those situations. I think Tom had another question, which I did not see. Scott,
how long does it take to get this system up and running?
Oh, great. So Tom's remembering all the great things that I forgot to cover. That's awesome. So it typically it depends on how many vendors, obviously, and the responsiveness of your vendors. We typically have a complete implementation done in 30 to 60 days. And as I mentioned before, we can continue on through that 30, 60, 90 follow-up as well. So typically up and running in 30 to 60 days with some hand holding all the way through an additional 90 days just to make sure everything's running smoothly. Great question, Tom. Thank you for reminding me.